If any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window. And I will come to you in order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout this duration. And where necessary, will mute those not being used. I would like also to ask officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to agenda business. Item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Alex Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to tender apologies on behalf of 4 members of the Democratic Alliance Group. They are Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas, Councillor Malcolm James, Councillor Philip Jenkins, and Councillor Chris Davis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That brings us on to item 2, declarations of interest. Have we any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Elaine Winstanley.
Hello, I've got a declaration of interest in item 8, the Capital Programme Outrun. My Stag Town Hall is run by Arwen Cultural Trust, which is my employer. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, approval of minutes. To receive the approval of the minutes of the council dated 12th of the 4th, 2023, can I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you. Thank you. Are we all agreed? To receive for approval the minutes of council dated 17th of the 5th, 2023, can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll formally move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. To receive announcement from dignitaries, I will start as number 1. I'll just go through a few of the highlights of my first month, if I may. I won't go into everything, obviously, but just a few of the points. STEAM Awards, Pencoed College, Thursday the 8th of June. The annual awards ceremony on Thursday the 8th of June, where we celebrated learners with outstanding academic achievements and commitment to study. The evening is one of the college's most notable events and took place in the STEAM Academy on our Bengal campus. So that was a large Pencoed campus, which, as I say, I'm on a learning curve, and it was really, really, really informative to look at that place. It's really huge, you know, and the topics and subjects available was quite remarkable, and it was really a very good event to attend. Highland Kenfig Veterans Association underwent a soft launch event on the opening day of January 7th, and due to the numbers who attended, the level of membership is now growing since that opening. So they decided to hold an event on the 10th of June 2023, at which the association headquarters located at Pyle Royal British Legion, which I attended. Another significant one was at Libraries County Book Quiz Grand Pavilion, Porthcawl. This was on behalf of the Alwen Cultural Trust. 2 Year 6 pupils. There is feedback somewhere, isn't there? Again, so has everyone got F1 on, please? Yeah, seems to have gone now then. Thank you. 2 Year 6 pupils representing schools from across the county were competing for a shield. All children will have read the same book, and then questions will be asked of the book, and the winning school will be taking away the shield back to their school. So this was a campaign, really, or an event to promote reading amongst primary age children. There's one other I'd like to just describe to you as well, please, which was the opening of the Kevin Glass Primary School of their Local Places for Nature grant, which was helped them to make the grounds even more purposefully and beautiful. Well, these were gardens within the school, which was quite remarkable and really positive thing for the children to be involved in the environment. They were also proud of recently won the Eco Schools Innovation Award in the Tidy Wales. And one particularly moving event there was we had a rendition of What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong from the children. It was really quite moving. And it was quite interesting again to hear the lyrics of the song. And before its time, probably. So I would recommend you, if you get a chance, just to listen to the lyrics of that song. Thank you very much. I leave it at that for now. Just I wanted to highlight the main points. So I'll return to the agenda. So to receive announcement from dignitaries, 2 members of the Cabinet. Could I ask Councillor Jane Gebby, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to tell members about how humbled I felt to represent all 22 local authorities in the Senedd yesterday as we launched the Social Partnership Act, or what is now considered the Welsh Way. I think it's really important because, as here in Bridgend, we're building on strong and unique Welsh relationships by strengthening the involvement and participation of our workforce and our trade union colleagues. Our workforce are our best assets, and the role and value of their contributions are significant to the improvements in well-being, not just within our councils, but as deliverers of local services, but within our communities as well. And our commitment here in Bridgend to social partnership is reflected in our valued long-standing relationships that we have with all our social partners. And I think it's really important that communities are at the heart of what we do, as our councils are focused on action to promote well-being in our communities that we all serve, recognising that local authorities are the largest, often the largest employers locally. And we can utilise socially responsible procurement in our commissioning process. So I think Welsh local government is really proud that we played such an important part in the development of this Act. And I think it's really important to note, on a personal note, as a trade union made politician, I was involved in the development of the Social Partnership Act from the other side of the table, which is why I was so pleased to be there yesterday. I also would like to bring attention to the inaugural Fostering Recognition Awards that we held, which marked Foster Care Fortnight, bringing local authority foster carers together with the council's fostering team to celebrate all their hard work and commitment. I think this was an excellent way of thanking all our council foster carers, expressing how grateful we are, because at the same time, we're thanking our hard-working staff, we're recognising their efforts, but without which we wouldn't have happy, stable environments for care experienced children and young people. It helps them to give them the very, very best start in life possible within a family environment, and they can much develop and much thrive whilst they're there. They make an absolutely huge contribution to our communities, and I would like to thank them all, carers and workers alike, for absolutely everything that they do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gebby. Councillor Spanswick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A public consultation is currently underway over plans for how irresponsible dog ownership could be tackled in the future. And I would ask members to throw their support behind it and encourage local residents to take part. The closing date is 18th of July, but there's still plenty of time to participate. The consultation is seeking views on extending a previous dog control public space protection order, which would see dog walkers issued with £100 fixed penalties if they fail to pick up after their pets in public areas, or exercising the dogs without carrying a supply of dog waste bags. The order also does not restrict dogs from being off the lead in specific areas, but it would require dog walkers to place their pets on a lead if requested to do so by an officer. Not complying with such instruction would be classed as an offence and could result in a £100 fine. So full details on this are available on consultation pages of the Bridgend County Borough Council website. And one other is also I'd like to highlight the 2023 Love to Walk Festival currently taking place. It features a range of different walks taking areas such as Blackmill, Blaengarrow, Bridgend, Puthcall, Rest Bay and Kenfigill. The annual event is always popular and well attended and is sure to be a big success. It's organised by the council in partnership with the Local Access Forum and a team of volunteers. For advanced booking is necessary, and again, you can find further details and a full list of planned walks at the Love to Walk website. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Spanswick. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to inform members of the community hub scheme that's being trialled in Garrow and Ogmore Valleys, which is supporting local residents by offering advice and help across a number of council services. Launched in May and available until the end of July, the pilot scheme has enabled customer services advisors to work out of the Garrow Valley Life Centre at Ponty Cummer every Wednesday and at the Ogmore Valley Life Centre in Ogmore Vale on Thursdays. This service is available between 10 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. on both days. The customer service advisor can help with queries and application for blue badges, housing, homelessness application, and council tax inquiries. They can also support people who want to access pest control services or report highway issues such as street lighting or potholes, or waste issues like fly tipping, graffiti, or dog fouling. The same level of support is also available at all Arwen staff libraries across the county borough. For all other matters, residents are advised to visit our website for more information or to use the council digital self-service options or to phone the council directly. This further support, which we are offering to our valley communities, reiterates the council's commitment to the county borough as a whole, and we will be analysing the results of the pilot scheme very carefully. I also would like to remind members that June is, of course, a Pride Month. And I would like to congratulate the organiser and the volunteers who helped to make the recent Pride Cymru event in Cardiff such a resounding success. As a local authority, we actively work towards visibly demonstrating our support for the LGBTQ+ community and helping to promote equality, diversity as part of the Proud Councils network. The work is even more important following recent increase in hate crimes, homophobia and transphobia, and the sheer amount of misinformation that's been circulated about the LGBTQ+ community. The Council is here to provide services for all people, irrespective of race, gender, age, sexual orientation, disability or religious belief, and we encourage residents to respect and appreciate the diversity which exists within our communities. This is why it is good to see that a summer parade event has been organised next Saturday to celebrate the different identities and increases the visibility of our own LGBTQ+ community here in Bridgend County Borough. Hosted by the Red Dragon in Litchard, this free outdoor event will feature entertainment, live music from various local artists and bands, as well as acts and display from the likes of the UAA Dance and Theatre School. The celebration will begin at 4 p.m. and the event will seek to raise funds for Terence Higgins Trust. So I hope that as many members as possible will take part and show their support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may just deal with some housekeeping for a brief second. I believe someone should have raised apologies for Councillor John Paul Blundell at the start. So if that could just be noted, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to provide members with a brief update on the latest developments within our regeneration programme at Puthcall. As part of our efforts to create new sea defences, which are not only more visually appealing, but offer greater protection and easier access to the beach, a series of Section 19 notices have been set up throughout the Coney Beach area. These have been posted in line with the ongoing purchase process, because there is a need to close small parts of the beach while we undertake this work. Once the new sea defences have been installed, the land will reopen and remain an openly accessible community space. Under the plans, an easy-to-navigate series of stepped reinvestments will be installed that will be in a similar design to many used in seaside towns across the UK. Strategically placed ramped access and associated flood prevention measures will also be introduced. With the public notices on site until the 7th of July, further details on the new sea defences will be released very soon. Elsewhere in Porthcawl, plans to incorporate a new seafront play area, a cosy corner, have been expanded to ensure the site can offer the best possible facilities for our children. As a result, the opening of the site will now be in 2 phases. The first phase will unveil a beautiful new stone and glass clad building that complements the historic harbour buildings and features 5 new retail units, offices for the harbour master, as well as community meeting space, public toilets and changing facilities. The second stage, which will follow later in the year, will incorporate a significantly larger playing area for children than was originally planned. This will feature bespoke design. The play area will be durable enough to withstand maritime weather conditions and will also remain in keeping with the listed status of neighbouring structures such as the Jennings building. The entire site will be extensively landscaped so that the finished project will feature plenty of public seating, a space for staged events, an all-weather canopy capable of providing comfortable outdoor shelter both in the rain and in the sun, because sometimes we do get it, and much, much more. Once both phases are complete, the newly revamped Cosy Corner will become an important part of the ongoing regeneration plans of Porthcawl and will function as the latest landmark development in the seafront area. Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recently attended a public meeting to gather information at first hand so that I may understand what concerns residents held regarding the High Bond proposal. It was my understanding at the time that the only byproduct to be piped off-site would be excess hot water, and that this would be used to help heat local community facilities. Following the meeting, I asked for clarification regarding the hydrogen pipeline. I have now learned that my original understanding was wrong, and that alongside the heat network of water pipes, there is a proposal to include a hydrogen pipeline to supply a hydrogen boiler for schools and other buildings around Ynysawdra. I regret that my comprehension of High Bond was inaccurate, and that subsequently my challenge regarding the pipeline was based on a misunderstanding of the project. It is only right I offer an unreserved apology for any upset or anxiety my actions may have caused. The High Bond project still has many stages to pass through, and I am confident there will be an open and transparent process to address the concerns of residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you very much. I'd like to call on Chief Executive now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week sees the return of Armed Forces Week in Bridgend County Borough, and we'll be marking it in different ways. A ceremonial re-signing of the Armed Forces Covenant will take place on Friday the 23rd of June here at the Civic Offices to mark its 10th anniversary. First adopted in 2013, the Covenant brings together a wide range of local organisations and pledges to support members of the Armed Forces community. It achieves this by ensuring that they can access housing, education and health and wellbeing services and benefit from specialist support designed to help them acclimatise to civilian life. Our Armed Forces champion, Councillor Martin Jones, who himself is a former member of the Royal Regiment of Wales, will join Council Leader Hugh David, myself and Mayor William Kendall to sign the document on behalf of the Council. Other signatories will include Lord Lieutenant Peter Vaughan, High Sheriff Professor Jean White, and representatives from the military, South Wales Police, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, Cwm Taf Health Board, Barvo, and the Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen's Families Association, and more. Following the re-signing of the Covenant, we'll be raising the Armed Forces flag outside the Civic Offices. Then, on Saturday the 24th of June, a parade will take place through Bridgend Town Centre. This is organised by Bridgend Town Council and is intended to demonstrate both the deep respect and the continuing relationship that we hold with members of our Armed Forces community, and we are of course very grateful to the Town Council for organising this. Featuring several troops as well as cadets, veterans and their families, The parade will be led by the South Wales Police Band, and it'll begin from Carnegie House at 11 a.m. and will head down Wyndham Street at American Place. The event will also feature military vehicles, activities, live music and stalls representing the armed forces, charities, local organisations and more, and it'll finish at approximately 1:45 p.m. with a drumhead service. Finally, as a local authority, we'll be encouraging former members of the armed forces and those who are preparing to re-enter civilian life to consider applying for roles within Bridgend County Borough Council. We actively encourage this and have been running a scheme for several years whereby former armed forces personnel are guaranteed an interview. Taken collectively, all of this represents how proud we are to reinforce our commitment to supporting our armed forces community across Bridgend County Borough, and I'm sure that members will want to welcome this too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 5, to receive announcements by the leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members will recall how Neath Talbot Council granted planning permission last November for a £250 million adventure resort in the Upper Avon Valley. Intended to trigger a new wave of employment and tourism in the valleys, major works are taking place to prepare the site, and around £20 million will have been invested into the project by autumn 2023. The development site is on the border with Bridgend County Borough on the edge of the Upper Llymby Valley, so there will be access routes through both areas, as well as shared employment, supplier training and investment opportunities. Fencing has started to be erected around the perimeter of the development site, and a number of public rights-of-way have been temporarily closed off to enable the work to get underway and to keep people safe. With construction taking place in stages and expected to last until 2027, it is likely that further footpaths will also need to be temporarily closed. The developers have already written to local residents living near the site to explain that this will be a temporary arrangement and to apologise for any unavoidable inconvenience that it may cause. In addition to the construction jobs that will be generated, developer Wild Fox Resorts has estimated that the resort will ultimately employ around 1,000 people and will incorporate a 50-bed hotel, spa and restaurant, 570 lodges and facilities for biking and hiking. As part of our ongoing engagement, I've asked for a site meeting with all Llymby Valley members, Avon Valley members and Wild Fox Resorts. In addition, Caira members, as the local members, have been invited to a new quarterly stakeholder forum. We will, of course, be seeking to share in and capitalise upon the benefits this ambitious project offers the valleys, and we will bring you more news as the resort develops. I would like to share with members an update which we received from Lee Walters, the Deputy Minister for Climate Change, and Councillor Andrew Morgan, leader of the Welsh Local Government Association, about the Bus Transition Fund, which has been developed as part of a collaboration between local authorities, Welsh Government, Transport for Wales and the public transport industry. The fund provides immediate financial support to bus operators in Wales so that vital services have been able to continue, and the letter recognises the effort of council staff to rapidly plan for a regional network of bus services which can be delivered when the Welsh Government Bus Emergency Scheme ends on the 24th of July. The letter outlines how councils and Transport for Wales have been asked to prepare an overview of how services will change, and confirms that while some services will be affected by post-pandemic travel patterns, there will be little or no impact on most areas. Without confirmation of regional plans, services will begin to be deregistered from the 26th of June, as bus operators are required to give 28 days notice to deregister a service. Plans are being revised as we speak, and as Welsh Government develop a longer-term sustainable funding model that bridges the gap to a franchising of services, a commitment of the Welsh Government. The letter and update does thank the councils for our support in ensuring that there is a continuity of service. We will, of course, bring you further news on the Bus Transition Fund as the fund develops further. Finally, we have witnessed some dramatic scenes in the county borough recently. I'm sure that members were as shocked as I was to see footage of the recent incident in which a light aircraft crashed in shallow waters just 50 yards off Porthcawl's town beach. Witnesses describe how they saw the single-seat plane swoop into the water and overturn while the tide was still incoming at around 9:20 a.m. Thankfully, the pilot, who was travelling alone, was supported by crews from RLNI and His Majesty Coast Guard Search and Rescue lifeboats, and we're very grateful to the volunteers of those services. They launched from both Porthcawl and Port Talbot. South Wales Police, Welsh Ambulance Service and South Wales Fire and Rescue also all arrived at the scene, and a helicopter was dispatched from St Athan to provide further support. The scene of the crash was quickly secured to prevent it from becoming a danger to navigation, and the Air Accidents Investigation Branch is currently investigating the cause of the incident, which even made international news. Elsewhere in the county borough, sadly, we saw large tracts of land in the Garrow Valley destroyed by wildfire, which the emergency services believe was started deliberately. The hillside fire, which occurred near Pontycymmer, burned for several days and was just one of 6 blazes that crews from South Wales Fire and Rescue had to simultaneously deal with. In fact, the service later confirmed that it has already responded to more than 400 grass fires and wildfires which have been set deliberately since the 1st of April, including 75 blazes which all took place within a single 7-day period. I can only imagine the pressure that is causing on our emergency services. These have destroyed miles of natural habitat in the Garrow, left behind a trail of significant damage, threatened property and lives of residents, as well as, of course, putting firefighters' lives at risk. Dealing with multiple fires mean the crews cannot be in 2 places at the same time, and this puts further lives at risk. As a result, we are working alongside South Wales Police, and I'm sure the Commissioner will refer to this in his presentation later, and we are working with South Wales Fire and Rescue, urging residents to report any suspicious activity to Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111 to follow some very simple rules designed to keep everybody safe by avoiding accidental fires, as sometimes these fires are caused accidentally. More advice is available by visiting the hot weather pages at the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service website. While incidents such as the fire and plane crash are thankfully rare, they have ably demonstrated how our emergency frontline services can always be relied upon to act quickly and to provide effective help and support. With this in mind, I'm sure that members will want to recognise and thank our frontline emergency services, including the volunteers, for this swift response to these incidents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Item 6, presentation by the Chief Commissioner of South Wales Police. I will now ask the Chief Executive to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be very brief. Members by now will recognise that we have a series of annual presentations from key partners. We welcome again Alan Michael, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the Deputy Commissioner, Emma Walls, who are going to give a presentation today. I understand today it's focused on 2 main items, which is violence against women and the anti-racism plan. Though they're probably also rapidly putting a slide in about arson on our hillsides from that last one. But I think, I'm sure either way, both will be happy to take questions both on those issues and indeed anything else of relevance at the conclusion of their presentation. So with that, Commissioner, would you like to come forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's do those need to be?
Yeah, putting them on is a good idea as well, isn't it? Just a few words of introduction for me, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the introduction, Mark. I hope that members are familiar with the Police and Crime Plan, which is something that was first put forward when I became the Police and Crime Commissioner in 2012, but which we've developed year on year so that it's a living document which reflects what I hear from the public. It reflects what I hear from councillors, and it reflects the way in which we respond to change. So the strapline across the top is everything is connected to everything else. And that is so true. And it's why our partnership with local government and the partnership of our PCSOs with local councillors is right at the heart of everything that what we want to see developed. Working with local government is essential, and although policing responsibility at a ministerial level isn't devolved, we work in the devolved environment, and so things like the social partnership, the values that are reflected by Welsh Government and our partners in local government are very much ones that we share. Confidence in policing is a big issue. Partly because events, particularly in the Metropolitan Police, have cast a very dark shadow across policing. And I wouldn't say that we're free from all the challenges that were reflected, for instance, in the Casey report, but we are doing our best to meet them. And South Wales Police is not the Met. Confidence, but is an issue. And for instance, it was pleasing to see that when there was an inspection on vetting recently, South Wales Police were found to be good in that essential act of protecting the public. And all inspections have shown the performance to be at a high level. We also see the investment in policing, which has been shifted, let's remember, by the Treasury quite deliberately onto the shoulders of local taxpayers rather than the central exchequer, is delivering value for money. For instance, levels of crime in general are less than our most similar forces, in other words, than the demographics would suggest to expect. However, the focus has always got to be on delivery and continual improvement, continual development. And there are three aspects that are important in terms of this year's iteration of the Police and Crime Plan. One is neighbourhood policing. It's been right at the heart for myself and Chief Constable Jeremy Vaughan over recent years. We have recruited the additional police officers for which money has been found by central government. They haven't found the money to replace the rest of the money we've lost, but the numbers have been replaced. But of course, that's new police officers, not the people with the years of experience. See, Martin Jones there was one of those who left at that time. We lost a lot of very experienced officers. You can't replace that, but we have the numbers at least, and they will grow in experience as time goes on. And there's a lot of enthusiasm there. Also, PCSOs, a lot were recruited as police officers during the uplift period. And that meant a lot of churn, and that's unfortunate because PCSOs are supposed to be there for the long term. But we have now got back to full numbers, including the additional, our share of the additional 600 provided by Welsh Government. And hopefully there will be stability now. And we're planning an event which I discussed with the leader and the chief executive in our quarterly meeting to get councillors and PCSOs in the room together so we can continue the process of strengthening that partnership working at that most local level. The other two priorities, as the chief executive indicated, are violence against women and girls and tackling sexual violence and dealing with racism. And on those, the lead work, not just actually in South Wales, but for Wales as a whole, has been undertaken by Emma Wolves, who's been my deputy for the last 5 years and does an absolutely brilliant job of driving delivery, making things happen. So I've asked Emma to present to you on those two aspects. And I hand over to Emma now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Prynhawn Da, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I wonder whether colleagues might be able to share the slides that we sent over earlier, if that's okay. It's always a panicky moment when technology is involved, and I'm glad that the Commissioner went first so he could work the speaker. So, as has already been set out, I've been asked to come to speak to you today around two very important priorities Firstly, gender-based violence and abuse, and secondly, race. Two issues that I think you'd all agree that in recent years have impacted significantly on trust and confidence levels in policing and underpin some concerns around culture, attitudes and behaviour of the workforce, not just within policing, but across the criminal justice system. And I want to reiterate again what the Commissioner has said, that although the spotlight has very much been on the Met, that does cast a shadow, but we also recognise as a leadership, both within the Commissioner's office and the Chief Constable, that those behaviours do exist, and it's about proactivity in terms of being able to weed those out within the force. So I have got both the challenge and the privilege of leading on both of these areas on behalf of South Wales and at an all Wales level in partnership with my policing colleagues and our criminal justice partners. So, starting with violence against women and girls then. It's remained a strategic priority for the Commissioner throughout his term in office now, and our work is currently being driven by the 5-year joint strategy that you can see on the slide. This sets out a blueprint for the practical action that we're taking with the force and partners to tackle violence against women and girls. It's underpinned by a number of central principles. One is about partnership at a hyper-locality level, so with yourselves as local councillors, but also at a national level through the criminal justice system and some of our wider organisations. Secondly, it takes the principle of making sure we have a whole system response where possible. This is not an issue that can be tackled in silos. This has a lot of underpinning and multifaceted drivers to it, and therefore we need all sectors to be working together in terms of the solutions. And lastly, and I suppose quite importantly, is about taking a public health approach. Heard a lot about that we need to be evidence-led and driven, but also trying to shift our activity from that reactive response in services through now to primary prevention and early intervention. Our strategy has not only helped inform our victims and witnesses strategy, which is a bit more recently published, but also has helped shape and inform Welsh Government's most recent national strategy published in the summer of last year, and has also helped drive the blueprint framework which has been developed, which is effectively a change and transformation programme with a non-devolved partnership driving activity and change right across Wales. So much as I'm sure you will know as a local council, you've invested in and much has been done in this area already, but gender-based violence and abuse continues to be a significant societal challenge. And this is represented by the activity that we see in relation to South Wales Police and the criminal justice system. So 27% of all crimes reported represent violence against offences that are categorised under violence against women and girls. That's 28,000 offences. Now, I have to say this is slightly down on previous years, which is naturally a positive outcome. However, it's still a significant scale and shows there is much more we need to do in terms of this issue. The top violence against women and girl offences, and I have to say that it's very much reflected in Bridgend at the locality level, stalking and harassment and domestic violence incidents. And the level of threat that this issue presents has been very much recognised at a national level, where this year it's been introduced as part of the strategic policing requirement that sets out national threats and the need for the capability that's required in order to tackle this. So again, taking that forward, as a Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, we made sure that we are influencing our local partnerships, so through our local criminal justice board, through community safety arrangements, and at a Wales level, making sure that violence against women and girls is a strategic priority for all. Next slide, please. So our strategy sets out a number of strategic objectives, which you can see there. I won't mention all of them. I will talk to examples of how we're achieving that though. But importantly, it's around sustainable funding for services, addressing that trust and confidence gap, making sure survivor voice is at the centre of everything that we do, meeting victims' rights and ensuring victims understand what those rights are, safeguarding the vulnerable, particular vulnerable groups, including children, and importantly, tackling perpetration. Next slide, please. So to address the first in terms of sustainable commissioning, we are investing around just over £4 million into services to tackle Vawdr SV across the South Wales footprint. And this is a combination of MOJ grant funding, ring fence funding around advocacy services, and from the Commissioner's Core Grant. and this is distributed through grants and contracts with a range of organisations and partners working across the locality area. You will also know that we work in collaboration at a local level. I think an example of income generation with partners is the recent Safer Streets Fund that Bridgend was a recipient of. Our commissioning activity, though, recognises gaps, and there are two main issues that we are working on. One is ensuring diversity of service delivery, so trying to get down to that hyper-locality level and understand the grassroots organisations that actually can provide better services for local groups and particularly minority groups, and services for children and young people. There is a big gap in those services, and we are looking to drive forward how we close those. And importantly, just to dovetail that, is support for our current providers in terms of the cost of living crisis. Obviously, there's an impact in terms of delivery, and we want to make sure that we protect the services that already exist, given there isn't enough of them to go around. So next slide, please. So I just want to give you some illustrations of interventions and services that we're currently investing in. And if I had 5 hours, I could probably talk to you about a range of things, but I'm going to try and condense it down. So first and foremost, to support our commitment to victims and survivors at the heart of shaping all that we do in response to VAWDA-SVE, we've set up a South Wales Victim and Survivor Network. This is to promote the views and experiences of victims and survivors into the work that's done in the criminal justice system, to monitor impacts of that survivor feedback in understanding what improvements are being made in all aspects of policy, practice and service delivery. And I have to say that that South Wales network, although working locally, it is also happening to inform regional and national work as well. And the model is being taken forward through that Welsh Government blueprint I talked about earlier. The network is open to representatives from local violence against women and domestic abuse networks and groups, and those survivor groups are supported very much by our specialist services that we're commissioning. We've got to remember that when we ask people to share their lived experience, there's a level of protection that we need to make sure that they have because of a trauma that has been suffered. To complement that engagement, service user engagement, is our public and community engagement model centred around young people, these young voices, which complements the work that we're doing, but particularly starts to talk to young people about their concerns in this space and their understanding of violence against women and girls. The next is a significant investment we're making in advocacy services, so domestic abuse and sexual violence advocacy, and we've managed to expand those community-based services into prison settings very recently, recognising that domestic abuse and vulnerability actually drive a lot of women's offending, and therefore there is a need to make sure that we're thinking of safety provision for women who resettle back into the South Wales area because risk continues to present. Work on perpetrators. You'll have heard the Commissioner over the years talk about, I think, our flagship service Drive, which is aimed at high risk, high harm perpetrators. It's delivered in the Bridgend area, and I have to say in the last year, it's worked with nearly 140 domestic abuse perpetrators, and that has meant that we've impacted on nearly 140 victims and over 260 children and young people as a consequence. I'm proud to say that in the Bridgend area, the engagement and completion rate is extremely high in comparison to other areas of 79%, demonstrating that the programme is really getting traction and embedding with local services. The programme is currently under a national evaluation, so we're always really keen to make sure that we are evidencing impact, and that impact is contemporary, and so that we can inform the next generation of those services. Hopefully we'll be able to come back and report to you the significant impact that's had on harm reduction and reoffending in any future meetings. So high harm perpetration, whilst important, is not just the space that we need to be in. There's a whole spectrum of level of risk that we need to look at and services to deliver. And again, we are working with partners to introduce interventions for less serious offending or those types of offences related to this issue that would otherwise get quite low level disposals, fines or perhaps no support at all. So introducing the CARA programme that will aim at looking at the other end of the spectrum from that high risk, high harm, again, reinforcing that whole system approach that we're seeking to look at. Stalking and harassment, I mentioned being one of the top violence against women and girl offences, and we have very recently introduced, along with the force stalking and harassment coordinator, and this is to improve the use of stalking and harassment protection orders, which currently are granted at a very, very low level. We hope in the appointment of a specialist practitioner who can work to support our police officers and partners in advising around risk assessment, enable us then to provide a more stronger response in terms of stalking and harassment as a crime type. And another initiative I think South Wales Police should be really proud of is Operation Sateria. So this is a national programme of which South Wales Police were one of the initial pilots. And this is to establish specialist teams to improve rape detection and convictions. And I have to say, in the 12 months that's been operating, South Wales Police, as a consequence, is now ranking first out of 43 forces in terms of detection rates. Still not as high as we want them to be, but they're in the trajectory in the right direction. This has also enabled us, through working with the Crown Prosecution Service and others, to reduce the length of investigations. I think we are the 9th shortest in length, again, nationally, out of 43 forces in our response to rape and serious sexual offending. I talked about the need for early intervention and prevention. So just to touch on 2 areas in this space. One is education and training of the workforce, and we're investing in a number of different programmes. So Domestic Abuse Matters, as well as gender and trauma-informed training packages that we've been able to co-produce with victim survivors and a range of organisations, so that we can upskill not just frontline police officers, but also partnerships working within. We're also making sure that we utilise and lever all of our programmes of engagement. So our Wales Police Schools programme, you may be aware of it, where schools officers engage with schools across the South Wales footprint. And we're making sure that we're putting education packages in place so they can support the school's environment and teachers in briefing young people around safety issues and harms relating to this issue. And lastly, I just wanted to touch in terms of a few developing priorities. Firstly is we have recently launched a police perpetrated Vowder SV advocacy service. This is very much in response to cases that have been raised in profile, both nationally and locally, that have placed a spotlight on the minority of officers whose behaviour is unacceptable and falls short of the very high standards that we should be expecting. This recognises the fact that some victims face a power imbalance between the professional position of their perpetrator and need better support and understanding, as well as advocacy through the process in terms of protection from repercussions. So we, alongside our Gwent colleagues, have introduced this service. It's very new, and again, I would be really, really pleased to come back and have the opportunity to talk about progress. I mentioned earlier about children and young people. Really needing a focus on how we address the gaps. We're setting up a South Wales Police Children and Young People Task Force, which is going to focus on a number of different issues. Advocacy for children and young people experiencing domestic violence, those who are experiencing child exploitation, looking at child-to-parent violence and abuse, and also thinking about where the gaps that we understand in the mapping exercise that we've recently taken forward are in developing and designing provision for children. I'm hoping that that will start to yield more focus and activity on that in that space. And finally, in terms of future priorities, technology and the online space. I think if you're anything like me, it's an alien world, but very increasingly is influencing the views, attitudes and behaviours of our population, and particularly children and young people. So it's our responsibility to better understand what is happening and going on in that space. We have a partnership underway with our Violence Prevention Unit and Plan UK to develop some pilots to address harmful beliefs and attitudes. And we're currently scoping out the Manosphere, which is an online movement of anti-feminist websites focusing on men's issues that seems to be driving more incel community activity, toxicity online, particularly towards women and girls. And you'll have seen some concerns, well, a number of concerns being expressed through our teaching colleagues in Wales about how the Andrew Tate as a figure in this particular space and debate has started to influence the attitudes and behaviour of young boys. We are very keen to be able to catch up with that space and start to think about how we introduce interventions. Next slide, please. So lastly, I very quickly want to touch on the work that we're doing on race. You will know that race disparities have been evidenced across the criminal justice system for some time. Numerous reports of evidence that that is the case, and the George Floyd incident and the Black Lives Matter movement simply raised the spotlight on the work that needed to be done. There's a clear trust and confidence gap between services and our ethnic minority communities across Wales, and as such, we decided in 2020 as a Criminal Justice Board for Wales that we would adopt a one public service approach in response to anti-racism, and committed as a board to putting in place a criminal justice anti-racism action plan, which we co-produced with over 600 ethnic minority community members. As well as the commitment to a plan of integrated partnership work, we also made a commitment to more transparency and accountability, and have recruited, in support of this plan, 12 independent members to scrutinise and oversee our delivery and effectively hold our feet to the flames to ensure that commitments and pledges that had been previously made are delivered on this occasion, and we sustain that focus and effort. This plan outlines 7 commitments and has a range of collaborative actions and was published back in September of last year. What's different about this plan? So differences is an important acknowledgement to our communities that there's a history of racism, that there's unfair treatment and injustices that have occurred, and that institutional and systemic racism exists. I think something, a position that hasn't always been acknowledged, and that an anti-racist approach is different from a race equality approach previously taken. That requires systemic, proactive activity to examine and break down some of the systems and processes that drive disproportionality and negative outcomes for ethnic minority communities. Next slide, please. So finally, I just wanted to conclude by giving a few examples of the progress on that plan to date. And I want to contextualise that by saying there is a significant amount of work to do here, but there is a commitment across leadership, both within South Wales Police, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and our criminal justice partners through Wales to make sure that we deliver this. So firstly, we've set up structures to make sure that there is a focus and action-orientated activity, and a race task force has been established nationally with leadership from both justice organisations and myself. I've talked about establishing the independent panel, but to complement that, we have also put in place a community engagement network that's been established, drawn from ethnic minority communities across the Wales area, so that we can check and challenge the reality of what it is that we've promised to deliver. And introduce a cultural competency framework, so the importance of our workforce really understanding the issues that present to those communities, so that better skills, professional judgment can be made in terms of how we work and respond. We are also working very much on data, a data dashboard that shows our response to ethnic minority communities right across the system. And data, I must say, is a real gap for us at the moment, with a significant amount of work to do. But we hope to have a dashboard that we can present to the public so they can see the work of the progress that is being made, but also gives an opportunity for yourselves as members, as well as other members of the public, to be able to ask us and question us on the work that we're doing. Lastly, we rounded this up with a anti-racism summit, the first for Wales, jointly with Welsh Government, where I have to say I'm really proud that 250 leaders from across sectors were in that room that day to, again, reinforce our commitment to the drive for this work, acknowledging we don't have all the answers, but wanting to work together in terms of how we address these issues. And a commitment was made that we would look on a locality basis of how we can review the system, so how we work together as a set of public services in terms of our actions and outcomes for our ethnic minority communities. I'm going to pause there because I realise I've covered quite a bit of ground, and I'm sure that you've got a very significant agenda to get through. But as I said, I'd be more than happy to come back with further detail on any of the issues presented at a later date, or take questions now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Emma.
very much.
I think you can see, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, why I thought it was worth hearing directly from Emma about those issues on which she's leading, and which we now have a national and international reputation, because things are happening and things are changing. We're both open to questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to questions, can I ask for a mover and a seconder for the report, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay then, so we are now open for questions, and the first is from Councillor Jane Gebby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation, both. I think I've got a couple of questions for you. Firstly, I'm really pleased to see the strides taken in relation to domestic violence against women, because less than 15 years ago, South Wales Police asked me to sign a disclaimer to say that they were not responsible for my safety when my ex-husband wanted to kill me. And we are being, and I mean, walking around with knuckle dusters in his hand within the community. So I'm just putting that out there. So I'm really pleased to see that that lived experience is being used to formulate policy. What I would ask is what that engagement looked like, because somebody completing a form online to ask for assistance is not sort of really very good. I'd also ask what performance indicators you're going to use to evidence your transformational aims that you know, how are you going to achieve those? What is it going to look like? And you've also made reference to children's safeguarding. So as the Cabinet Member for Social Services and with responsibility for safeguarding here, I would ask what reassurance you are going to give me in relation to communication from South Wales Police when we are relaying information about younger people and concerns we have around that, because we know that there are some delays in that system at the minute, and you did refer to data systems yourself. And the last question you'll be pleased to hear is, how many repeat offenders do you have coming onto your programmes? Because if someone is a repeat offender and they keep returning, then actually the programme isn't working very well. Thank you.
I mean, can I start at the end? And
Yeah,
say,
that's fine.
and say that it's.
Can you use your mic, please?
Yeah. Does that work? Yes. It's the very fact that there are repeat offenders that led us to say we have to look not just at the victim who deserves and needs support, but at perpetrators who are very often repeat perpetrators. And that's why the emphasis changed during my time to saying we've got to have a balanced approach to these. I'll ask Emma to come in on some of the detail, but the thing I would stress is that this has to go right through society. It has to go from the top to the bottom. It has to go through every agency. In terms of criminal justice, we devoted the September before last, our annual in-person meeting of all the leaders of criminal justice. So that's the Chief Crown Prosecutor, the head of the probation service, HMPPS, the prisons, the four police forces at a police and crime commissioner and chief constable level, to hearing lived experience and then challenging ourselves on what we were going to do. So we're trying to make sure that it goes throughout everything we do and throughout the force as a whole. Emma.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Some really, really important questions. So first of all, thank you very much for sharing your experience, and your question about the nature of our engagement is absolutely critical. I want to reassure you that that engagement takes all sorts of forms as appropriate to the victim and survivor's experience. It's not a questionnaire or a form. It very much centres on the opportunity for victims and survivors to come and talk directly to us. So not the Survivor Network is supported in relation to speaking to specific policy people from our organisation, as well as service providers on the ground. Our Young Voices piece of work that I talked to you about actually provides the opportunity for young people to come and talk directly to the Commissioner and leadership in policing to ask questions about safety issues and concerns. So I want to say it's a real mixed bag of engagement, has come quite far in the last 15 years, but with a significant amount of work still to do. Repeat offending, my background is in the prison and probation service, and I'm a former probation practitioner, so completely understand that the evidence of success for us is about complete cessation in reoffending, but the challenge of being able to get that behaviour change when you have a window of opportunity on statutory services and prevention. And this is why, as the Commissioner's team, we want to make sure that there's services in place in between those statutory court orders, so that work can continue, not just to monitor and surveil perpetrators, but also to provide that support and intervention in the hope that we reduce that offending behaviour. Metrics of measurement. I love this question, and it is incredibly important. There's a range of different metrics that we would look to measure in terms of both distance travelled and impact and outcome, and that is reduced reoffending rate, reduced level of harm, reduced number of reports in terms of VAUC crime types. Again, I'm quite happy to share with you, perhaps in correspondence, the metrics for measurement, so that we can come back and have a conversation around that. And I think I've lost the last question. Apologies.
I think it's also important to say that what we're trying to do is to look at every aspect of the issue. So, for instance, there's an opportunity, Swansea Prison has engaged with us very positively. So the DRIVE programme is delivered in Swansea Prison. So there's that period where people are out of the community, out of the family. That's a period of opportunity. Now, DRIVE is only for high-level offenders. So we're also looking at working with Swansea Prison on a lower level offending. The government talks a lot about serious violence. We've taken the approach that all violence is serious. So low-level violence can be the precursor of high-level violence. If you don't enter early, if you don't deal with bullying in the schoolyard, if you don't deal with those low-level offences, it's not that they're less serious, it's that they may be indicators of worse things to come. So serious violence needs to be dealt with, but one of the ways of dealing with serious violence is to be serious about all violence, and that's the approach that we're adopting. I think the one thing I want to say at the end is that probably these issues are never going to go away totally, because they're about people, they're about bad instincts that people have, they're about the results of adverse childhood experiences very often, so that all of this needs to be understood. What we want to do is to push the boundaries. I said violence against women and girls was my first priority to tackle when I first became the Commissioner. I think I can look back on the 10 years and say that we've made progress. And one of my better appointments was Emma as deputy to take a grip on some of these issues. But that's a journey when you look at it and say we need to be impatient, but at the same time to recognise this is a very, very long journey, which requires everybody in policing, in local government, in the wider criminal justice system, all to have a focus on it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thank you very much. Can I just point out, for us who are online, those who are moving and seconding, we can't hear any of it. So if they could put their microphones on, please. But on to my questions now. I'll start off with a real positive. We've got community engagement in Coity Hire. We've got Team 3 PCSOs and it's excellent. And we've seen that improve over the last year or so. They're regularly out there. They come out when we call them, when residents call them. They're seen in the community. And so I wanted to just say thank you about that. I have really seen an improvement in that. What I have seen, though, as well, is hate crime. And when we've looked at the statistics, they come through as very low. I know myself and Councillor Rhys-Goode had worked on this previously when I raised some concerns with him, that some cases, there are concerns that some aren't being recorded as hate crime. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're doing to improve how you're recording hate crime. And then as a group member, I think, and I think this is true across the board for all members. You mentioned about bullying, trolling, online toxicity, and how things have changed in the community. Now, for the first time in 6 years, I feel quite vulnerable. And I know that other of my colleagues have also felt vulnerable in the past with the way we're spoken to, we're dealt with, the allegations that are made against us, the threats. But I feel I've been let down by South Wales Police, and so have some of my group members, because we're never taken seriously. So I wondered, given all the attacks against politicians, you're talking about high profile cases, what's going to be done to work more closely with us members so that we also feel protected, particularly as female ones as well, who tend to bear the brunt, I think, in some cases of some of these attacks. And my final question is, how are we going to be working more closely as an authority when it comes to things like highway safety? Because I know when I put in referrals to highways, I'm told it's a policing matter. I go to the police, they say it's a highways matter. How are we going to improve dialogue so that we get an answer and we're not to-ing and fro-ing? Thanks very much.
Microphone.
My answer to the last point is that I think the way forward is generally for us to say it's a common problem, it's a problem we share, and to encourage officers in the police and officers in the local authority to say, let us deal with it, not let you or me deal with it. And that is a challenge. It's difficult because everybody's under pressure. But I think I know it's the philosophy of the leadership of the council here, and we work as closely as we can. I think sometimes we need, the granular detail of examples in order to pick it up when things have gone wrong. On hate crime, I'll ask Emma to come in on this, but one of the things that I think is a major issue is the sort of language that is allowed to be acceptable on the internet, in the virtual world, because it becomes acceptable. Emma referred to the sexualization of the attitudes of boys and young men online, very often through activities on the dark web and stuff that comes from abroad. And I say this having been the Minister for Internet Governance for a while and involved in trying to set up international cooperation on governance of the Internet. It didn't work because there was an extreme between China wanting to control it and America wanting no controls whatsoever. Our collaborative model didn't produce the influence that I would have liked. So it's a lawless place in many ways, and that's a part of the problem because people feel empowered to use the sort of language they pick up on the internet, in social media and online. But in terms of the hate crime being dealt with within the force, Emma.
So just in relation to hate crime then, absolutely in terms of focus on recording hate crime and hate incidents, and how that is interpreted and applied. So we've done a piece of scrutiny work with the force as a commissioner's office to understand how that data is recorded and made some recommendations in terms of improvement, but more widely to that in relation to a wider response to hate crime perpetrators, and particularly in relation to race. We've recently commissioned a piece of research in collaboration with Welsh Government that we hope findings and recommendations will set out a programme of work focused on hate crime, not just within policing's response, but also in terms of partner response to improve that service, that understanding that service and delivery. The second point you made about women's experiences of online abuse, totally concur and recognise your comments in terms of I think women are 27 times more likely to face online abuse than men. I talked earlier about a piece of work we are currently scoping with two partnership providers, and I would suggest that as part of our work we look to consult with a range of different community groups and professions, and I probably suggest that perhaps elected members may be one of those community groups that we consult on to actually understand the specific issues and risks as it pertains to you. And I hope that might be something that you'd like to engage in.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity as well to remind members not to leave the chamber, please. So we've got another 4 questions. I'm not going to take the one from Councillor Joanna Llewellyn. I'm going to take the next 4, and so the last one to ask the question will be Councillor Paul Davis. So with that in mind, Councillor Rees, please.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Mr.
Rees.
Mayor. No worries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you both for the presentation. I think the work you raised around violence against women and girls and racism is tremendously important, and I think it's really encouraging to see that that is a focus. But I just wanted to raise a question about another action plan that the Welsh Government has recently released, which is the LGBTQ plus action plan. And I was just wondering what work was being done, and it sort of touches on Councillor Amanda Williams's question as well, of what work is being done to ensure that homophobia, biphobia, transphobia is being combated, both externally in the community where there is increased hate crime, much as with extreme misogyny. There is extremely difficult questions coming from the community, I know, and a lot of concerns about safety within the community, but also what work is being done to stamp out that sort of homophobia, transphobia, biphobia within the force itself, to ensure that when members of the LGBTQ plus community do come to the police, which sometimes doesn't happen because there is a traditional lack of confidence, that those people are met with understanding and compassion.
That's a perfectly fair comment. I suppose the thing to remember as well is that we now have a very young workforce, a comparatively new workforce because of the restored numbers, and they're recruited from a society which has some of those attitudes within it. So I would say certainly there's a very strong commitment from myself, but also from the Chief Constable to tackle those issues: homophobia, misogyny, racism. They're all part of creating a bad society, and they're all extremely difficult to root out entirely. So it's a big challenge. I think that's a point I'd make generally about the issues we're talking about. You wouldn't need a police force if everybody was nice. You wouldn't need a police force if everybody was polite and law-abiding. We do need a police force, but we need a police force that remembers the first rule that was set by Sir Robert Peel: the first responsibility of the police is to prevent crime. So it's not just about response, although I think it's next week we're celebrating response policing, and I don't think we'll ever stop needing it. But in particular, my role, the crime part of my role, is to hold the feet of the police force to the responsibility of preventing, and that's about eradicating the attitudes that lead to bad things happening. And you illustrate those very well. We've seen a transformation. I mean, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, for the first time, I saw police in South Wales, and actually representation from police across England and Wales, joining in Pride, and joining in it with pride rather than just with a degree of tolerance. So I do think that within operational policing at the leadership level, there have been major changes, but there's always more to go. There's always the question of ensuring that you have real leadership within it. I mean, I've seen some leadership. The Chief Constable came past my office about a fortnight ago, and I put my head out to say hello. He'd been there to tell a group of people that were in the Let's Talk About Race groups that are done within the force why it was that it's actually a part of the central role of policing to understand how to tackle those issues, not peripheral. And I think that applies generally across the board. Emma, is there anything you want to add on that? Okay. And it's not a perfect answer, but we're dealing with very big issues.
Thank you. Councillor Timothy Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentations. Two brief questions, really. Firstly, you started your presentation about restoring confidence, particularly for vulnerable groups. You touched on the incidents involving the Metropolitan Police. Back in 2009, Sir Paul Stevenson recommended that the default option for police patrols doesn't necessarily have to be doubling up, and that there could be lone police patrols. I think in part that may have led to some anxieties from vulnerable groups. Now, in my ward, I've been on quite a few patrols with the local policing team, and that's involved lone policing and policing in, two or more police officers. So it's not clear to me what your strategy is in this regard, so I'd be grateful if you could help me with that one. Secondly, in my ward as well, we do have quite a few transport providers, particularly train stations, bus stations, and I have had feedback from various vulnerable groups that they do feel quite anxious, particularly at night, in using these transport providers. And I have fed that back to Transport for Wales. In your strategy, you touch on partnerships. I appreciate it's a very overarching and strategic document, but you don't go into details about partnerships. But is this something that you're actively looking into, working in partnerships with British Transport Police, local authorities, and transport providers?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, on the lone policing, I think it's very much horses for courses, and I would leave that as an operational issue for the chief constable. On the other hand, the question is, do you use that time on patrol really constructively? For instance, one of my bugbears in the past has been two PCSOs walking down the street and talking to each other all morning, whereas if they walked down the opposite side of the street and each of them visited all the shops on the way down, they would be gaining far more information. And that's part of what the discussion that goes on, shall we say, between us about the best use of the resources that we have. Confidence is a very difficult issue to talk about, because a lot of the issues of confidence are what people are seeing very genuinely as being horrific cases that do undermine the confidence, particularly of women in policing, because bad things can happen. And it's also the case that it's not just in the Met. I've had to deal in my role with loss of pensions on individual officers who've not just been found guilty of something, not just been sacked, but actually taken that stage further of losing their pension rights because of the extreme nature of the things they've done. And you just look at that and think, how did you think you could get away with it? And what on earth were you thinking being a police officer with the values in that role? And still that happens on occasions. The one thing that I can be confident about is that when it happens in South Wales, once somebody is identified as being an inappropriate person in the whether it's as a police officer or a member of police staff, that action is taken immediately by the chief constable, and that we're robust in supporting him in those approaches. As far as the bus stations are concerned, we look at where stuff happens, and I have to say that, and this isn't true just in Bridgend, it's true in Merthyr, it's true in other places, that those hubs, if you like, of interchange in transport do have a disproportionate amount of things happening, and therefore we look, in the case of railway stations, to work in conjunction with British Transport Police. In the case of bus stations, to work in conjunction very often with the local authority to look at the best way to tackle them. It is clearly an issue, not one that's going to go away, but one where we've got to have as much visible presence as possible to try to give reassurance to the public and obviate those risks. Did you want to add?
Yeah, just to add reassurance, really, that absolutely British Transport Police is a partnership, and they sit on our Fawr Rescue task force at a Wales level, at community safety level, working with local authorities, particularly around safer streets and women and girls' safety, of which transport would be included, and also through the Fawr Rescue Blueprint programme. I talked about the joint collaboration with Welsh Government and a range of different sector partners. There is this dedicated strand of work on safety in public spaces, where at the moment we are just developing the priorities that need to be delivered through that, which will include transport, as well as a range of other public space issues that we know present concern for members of community and the public. And again, I'd encourage anything that may be coming out for yourselves locally in terms of understanding what public spaces may need further support and tackling issues, that gets fed back direct, and hopefully my email address will be shared with yourselves later on.
What I'd just say as well, you see quite a bit about antisocial behaviour being tackled, and the initiatives against violence that I mentioned earlier. What has been developed is an analytic tool to go to the very local level to identify where there is a disproportionate level of violent incidents in order for us to be able to focus on those locations and hopefully work out what's going on, why it's going on, and what we can do to prevent it, as distinct to just responding to it. Dan Jones, who's an executive member of my team, has been very much involved in that, working with the public services boards and the community safety boards across South Wales, along with Jason as an operational lead within the force. So there is, if you like, progressive things happening, which hopefully will enable us to focus attention more where it's needed, and also more on preventing it happening in the future rather than just responding.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Walter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner. Not so much a question, more about using this forum to offer a degree of recognition. I co-represent the Porthcawl East ward, and we work closely with the Porthcawl Neighbourhood Policing team and the PCSOs for the ward, who are professional, they're effective, and they're proactive. We've recently started joint ward walks together, visibly looking out for issues that we can work collaboratively on. So I'd like to ask you to pass on that feedback through any formal channels that you might have with our thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's music to my ears. What we want to do is to, where we hear good stories like that, make sure that that happens everywhere. It hasn't always happened. Quite honestly, PCSOs have been expected to go out, be professional, be original, work out their own solutions, and we're trying to recognize the challenges that they have. So one example is being very clear about what a PCSO is for. Number one, communicator, but that communication must be listening, understanding the concerns of the local community, and then working with the community, with the local councillor, to try to deal with those concerns. Secondly, problem solver with the community, not doing things to the community. And thirdly, empowering and supporting the community to be resilient. We will this year be celebrating 20 years of PCSOs. It's gone up and gone down because of the period of austerity that gave such a horrific time for local government and for policing. But I think we're in a much better place now. The partnership working, the community safety work is back, and I acknowledge Bridgend Council's contribution in that field as being excellent. So that's something to celebrate between us. But thank you for what you said. Yes, we'll certainly feed it back. And to your colleagues, I would say, if it's not quite that standard yet, the aspiration is to get it to that standard in every ward. And the event I talked about later, probably in September, I hope all of you will be involved in, and we'll get the PCSOs in the Bridgend area with you to have a talk about how we push it further forward. The commitment is there within operational policing as well. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and your colleague. I'd like to concur with my colleague's previous statement there. We've got two fantastic sergeants up in the Llanelli Valley. I won't embarrass them by naming them, Alan. We've got excellent PCSOs. This very day, I took a call about 12:30 this afternoon from one of our PCSOs, and actually I did the new Listen Initiative survey, which South Wales Police have recently brought in. It's very by pure chance. So if you could tell the committee, the council here, a bit more about that. Second, the other thing, it's a question for yourself. I know somebody who drives a Go Safe van out of the police headquarters, and they come up to the Llanelli Valley, and I've asked them, can I come on the van with them, because they're very unpopular, as we know. They're one of the most unpopular parts of policing, just about speed cameras, aren't they? but I'd to get moving inside. Would it be okay for me or other councillors to join them on the patrols around the valley like we would with PCSOs and other police? Or is that something a bit? Would they need permission from from HQ or whatever?
Yeah, that's certainly a request that we can pass on, and I'm sure that the force will be open to that on all sorts of things, like for instance the use of live facial recognition, which has been a really useful tool but isn't universally admired. South Wales had a completely different approach to the Met, for instance, by saying if we use live facial recognition, the vans are labelled so the public can see. We're open to the public coming in and seeing what we're doing. We've arranged demonstrations for people. We could certainly do that for councillors if people are interested, and I'm sure that would apply to the Go Safe arrangements as well. Thank you.
Phone, please.
Yeah. We had a little bit of discussion about this because there was a suggestion that we would do something. I don't know if there are probably enough councillors here who are old enough to remember the old ringmaster scheme, which was a way of worrying the hell out of people who weren't at risk, of putting information out randomly without any clarity about what it was for. And we had a lot of discussion and came to the conclusion, well, the most important thing is to listen to the public. It's not to tell the public or to put stuff out. And therefore, the South Wales Listens is a new system, which we hope people will sign up to. But it's basically about listening to you, listening to members of the community. What are your concerns, to help the PCSOs in particular in understanding what the issues are in the local area. If you like, it's industrializing the personal contact that they have on a day-to-day basis. In my view, it won't replace it because it's actually going around in the local community, seeing people and talking to them and listening to what they have to say that is the essential. But if it supplements that successfully, that will be really helpful. So I would encourage people to make use of it on that basis, that it's for you to tell us stuff. That is the purpose behind it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I say, so I'm aware that there are probably many more questions, but if they could be forwarded to, that would be acceptable. Okay, thank you very much. Can I take members to the recommendation and ask if they are all in favour?
I'll formally move, Mr. Mayor.
Microphone on. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Second. Oh, sorry. I take members. We are all in favour, yeah? Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Okay, so I propose now a short 10-minute break. So if we are back, well, we make it a little bit longer to make it easier, is it? I think about if we're back at 20 to 6, that'll be fine. And thank you. And thanks once again for a very informative and thought